Jared Cook's a good football player. He says that Jon Gruden, the new coach of the Raiders, is showing the Raiders old grainy film from 1976. I laughed at this because I don't know how this this Raiders Gruden thing's going to work. Baseball is considered old, stuck in its ways, rigid, and stodgy. But even 10 years ago in baseball, we didn't talk about launch angles and exit velocity. We didn't have defensive shifts. Starters were paid a lot more than bullpen guys. But baseball, stuck in its ways, right, has made massive changes. 10-year contracts, didn't have those 10 years ago. Bullpens now are more important than starters. That wasn't the case 10 years ago. A shortstop plays out in right field. That didn't happen 10 years ago. So baseball's stodgy, and 10 years ago it didn't look the same. What about football? The NFL is like Silicon Valley. They change week to week, day to day. Football doesn't even look the same on television that it did 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you had something called huddles and fullbacks, and the overtime rules were different, and the PAT rules were different, and you didn't have 4 and 5 receivers all the time. But that part, I think Jon Gruden can figure out. What worries me about Jon Gruden is the other stuff, not the schematics, not the rule changes. The world has changed in 10 years. 10 years ago, a coach, an old white male coach, could walk into a locker room that's diverse and say, no politics, and it was understood. If the old ball coach walks into an NFL locker room and says that today, he's racially insensitive, or worse. There was no Twitter. There was no Instagram. There was no Snapchat. The players weren't as empowered. But players today, and rightfully so, have an opinion, because we go to these games for the players, not the GM, scouts, and coaches. Jon Gruden will figure out all the football stuff. I don't think he'll figure it out immediately. He'll be a little rigid. It'll take a little while. It did for Joe Gibbs. But the world's changing now. And that's what worries me about the Khalil Mack situation. The best defensive player arguably in the NFL. And Jon Gruden hasn't talked to him since February. That's not a schematic thing. That's a personality thing. That's the way it used to be thing. It used to be the NFL was all about the coach. Not even Bill Belichick is calling all the shots in the NFL anymore. You want to call the shots, there's other places to do it. It's not the NFL. It's not the NBA. It's not Major League Baseball, where managers are increasingly replaceable. So I worry when I read this story, and I got to be honest, I laughed at the headline. Jared Cook says Jon Gruden is showing the Raiders, quote, old grainy film from like 1976. I just don't think this thing's going to work long term. It may work for a year. Derek Carr is an unbelievable quarterback. But I got to give my staff credit. They found something. I just can't figure out why Jon Gruden is not communicating and can't get a hold of Khalil Mack. But we found out why their communication is so bad. Gruden is using America Online. And he's trying to get a hold of Khalil Mack using this device. And Joy, it's just not working.
Someone keeps picking up the phone in his house. That's what it is. And then he has to keep starting over.
So he's trying to get a hold of Khalil Mack. And the connecting, it's not working. Yeah, it's just not working.
Maybe that's Khalil emailing him back.
In 2008, when Gruden left, here was a headline. On internet television, that's how it was termed, both NFL.com and NBCSports.com carried complete live games for the first time ever on that thing called the internet. That's the game he left. And football is fluid, man. There's jobs that don't change in 10 years. They're called the post office. NFL, jettison the thing for a decade. I don't care if you're talking about it on football. That locker room is a completely different place. This is an interesting story. There's a new book out. It was released yesterday called 12. That's Tom Brady's number. 12. The inside story of Tom Brady's fight for redemption. And it talks about Tom Brady's unhappiness and displeasure over Deflategate. And Robert Kraft in particular, siding with the NFL, not Tom Brady with Deflategate. Now, there's a quote in the book where Robert Kraft says, at no time should the agenda of one team outweigh the collective good of the full 32, meaning take care of the league before you take care of an individual. Apparently, Brady was watching that press conference and blew up, was furious, grabbed the phone, and called the executive director of the Players Association, DeMaurice Smith, and yelled, "What the blank? Why am I not getting the support I deserve on this thing?" Okay, time out. Tom, New England is a ruthless, cold business. Coaches and players are expendable. Yet the minute that ethos landed on Tom, he didn't like it. Tom, the reason you're Tom Brady isn't because of your mobility. You're the strongest guy with the best arm. It's because they've been cold and ruthless. And they get rid of coaches, and they get rid of players, and they don't lose a second of sleep over it. That's why you're Tom Brady. The only time, in fact, that Bob Kraft had a heart, that the New England Patriots weren't ruthless, is the biggest mistake they've ever made. They gave away Jimmy Garoppolo for a nickel and a ham sandwich to San Francisco. That is the one time they decided we should be nice to Tom. And Tom has been good to us. And we should support Tom. And so let's take our next quarterback for the next decade and let's give him to San Francisco for virtually nothing. A second-round pick, which has about a 65% chance of doing anything. Garoppolo has a 100% chance of winning games. He's 5-0 in his first 5. If you work for a ruthless organization, expect them to be ruthless. Walmart is legendary. They're ruthless. They go into a town and squish small-time businesses. Squish them. They negotiate for every penny on every deal with their retailers. I know I have 2 buddies who have had products and have had to negotiate with Walmart. You don't make any money. You don't make any money. They squeak, but they know you want your product in their store. You make no profit. Sometimes you lose money. They're ruthless. So if you work for Walmart, don't complain in negotiations. They don't pay you much because they're ruthless. That's what they do to small businesses. That's what they do to retailers. And that's what they do, frankly, to their bosses, their management, and their employees. They're ruthless. That defines what New England is. They're cold. They're covert. They're quiet. They're under the radar. They are system over player. And that's largely, and I love Brady, but he's not as talented as the Elways and Marinos. He doesn't throw the ball like Aaron Rodgers. Tom has benefited greatly from that bottom line business model. Don't complain if it occasionally lands on you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.